everybody. Let me get my PowerPoint loaded. Okay, so by now you should have watched the conference that had to do with rhetorical analysis, which was just sort of an overview of rhetorical analysis. If you haven't watched that conference yet, I would recommend going back and watching that one before you start this one. So this conference is just going to walk you through and give you some examples of how to practice with rhetorical analysis, and we're going to be using Vanessa Bryant's speech at the memorial for her husband, daughter, and others as our practice, as our practice text. There we go. Okay. So here's what you're going to be doing for an upcoming assignment, and remember to look in modules on in modules on Canvas, and then you'll see in the weekly schedule when things are due and what you have to do exactly for your discussion board post. So this is just meant to help you sort of be prepared for that and have an example of what it looks like when you practice with rhetorical analysis. So the first thing that you're going to do is open up Vanessa Bryant's speech. Again, there are links to this on Canvas under this week's module. And then remember that you're looking for certain things as you go. We're going to be annotating. If you're not familiar with annotating, annotating just refers to marking up the text as you read. So we want to maybe highlight certain things that seem very important. You could underline or circle. You can take notes in the margins, and annotating is really up to you in terms of whatever method you have that works for you is completely fine to use. Remember that as you go, you're looking for specific things. So one of the things we're looking for as we read is the rhetorical situation. And we're also looking really closely at examples of rhetoric. So we want to identify the rhetorical situation surrounding Miss Bryant's speech, and then also we want to look at those different examples of rhetoric that she uses within that speech. As we're working, find examples and take notes about why they work, and in terms of why they work, we're looking specifically at how do they affect the audience. I always encourage my students to find as many examples as you can because it's a better thing, I think, to be sort of over-prepared and have lots of examples than to be under-prepared and only find one or two. Remember that when you're doing this for the essay, you'll need one example for each paragraph. And it's okay to have lots of examples of the same type of rhetorical feature. For example, we know that this speech was given at a memorial service, so there might be lots of examples of pathos, right, where she's appealing to the audience's emotions, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're talking about different examples. So finding background information, remember that this is the rhetorical situation. Some questions that we want to make sure we know the answers to or find the answers to while we're working with a text are all of these here. So we want to find out what was going on at the time that this speech was given. We need to know who the speaker is and what she's responding to. We should also know something about who her audience is and what her goal or goals might be for giving this speech. And then we should look at what we think about how she wants people to feel. What does she want us to believe, think, or do after hearing this speech? So I also want you to gather your thoughts here. Remember that this is where the annotating comes in. So we want to organize our thoughts in a way that works for us as we read through this particular speech. Remember that you need to name the author or speaker's purpose. You need to discuss the rhetorical situation briefly. Name those rhetorical features that you find that you see her using. Explain how and why each one works. And then make sure to introduce, cite, and explain each time you're using a quote. So remember that we have this signal phrase where it's like the author says, Mrs. Bryant says, okay? And then after the quote, cite an MLA. That's the last name plus a page number, such as Bryant 1. And then explain the significance in your words. So these are just sort of some general goals that we're looking to accomplish when we get to writing about this. So when we're discussing the rhetorical situation for this particular speech, remember we're still using an outside source to help us sort of convey that background information to our audience. So make sure that you have an outside text if one is needed, like for the rhetorical situation, it is. In this case, I actually gave you an outside source, so you have that one to use. Remember that for your essay, though, you'll be finding one on your own. And then other information that we need in order to understand the rhetorical situation. So we need to know that she recently lost her husband and daughter in a tragic accident. We also need to know that her husband was a celebrity and he was pretty well loved by the public. Outside sources help us understand all of this. For your essay, you can use any outside source you can find that helps us to better understand the piece that you're analyzing. And again, if you have questions or need help with that, talk to your group mates, talk to a tutor, or talk to me. And then once you've chosen your outside source, you just need to narrow it down to one quote from the outside source that will help you discuss that rhetorical situation. So this is how I would gather my thoughts if I were sort of organizing this to start writing. Again, you can do this however you would like to for yourself, but this is just one example of like what it looks like when I take notes. So I like organizing in kind of like a table. So I've got on one side the rhetorical situation and sort of my goals for things that need to happen over here, right? So I need to answer who Kobe Bryant was, who Gigi Bryant was, what happened before this speech, who the speaker is, how people viewed Kobe and their family. And then once you've made your notes, you can explain those things in your own words in one paragraph of your essay. But these were just some of the goals that as I was getting ready to write this paragraph, I was thinking I need to try and cover most of these things here. Remember also that your example from your outside source needs to be in that paragraph as well. So what I've done is I made myself some notes over here about the things that I need to explain in my own words. But then I also gathered my example so that when the time comes to write this paragraph, I have my quote and my signal phrase and my citation ready to go. So this is the example that I chose from the outside source. And this is the author's name, so it's a good idea to introduce the author's name and the title of the source the first time that you use any new source in any of your writing. So I have the author's full name here, Heather Navarro, author of, and then I've got the title, What Hurts Most About Vanessa's Speech for Parents and Spouses Isn't the Extraordinary, It's the Ordinary. So this is the title of her article. Notice that each word is capitalized and it's also in quotation marks. So now I've introduced that for my readers. And then I have the signal phrase, right? She explains why people reacted with such emotion to Vanessa Bryant's speech. Navarro explains that as Vanessa Bryant made her way up to the stage in Staples Center, about to speak for the first time publicly to the world since her soulmate and precious daughter were tragically taken from this world, many in the audience and watching from home were surprised she would have the strength to speak. And then I have the citation. So this is all information that's going to help me when the time comes to write that rhetorical situation paragraph, because I have some notes for myself about things that I need to make sure I mention, and then I have an example that I can use as well. So I'm making sure that I'm using that example from the outside text. I did the same thing while I was reading through the speech so that I could gather my thoughts about talking about rhetoric. So again, I made like a little table. You can do this however you would like to. But on one side, I've got the rhetorical feature that I see happening, right? And then the example from the speech. And then I have information about why it works so that when I'm going back to writing about this later on, I don't have to reread the whole speech and try and find everything all over again. The first time that I'm reading, I'm making a note of, okay, this is an example of ethos. This is an example of pathos. And then taking some notes for myself about why it works so that when I need to go back and write my, paragraph or a couple of paragraphs about this for an assignment, I have everything here and it's going to make that a little bit easier on me later. So a couple of examples that I included, ethos. So Mrs. Bryant uses ethos in her speech to show her audience she's a caring and selfless person. She starts off the speech by saying, "First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today." And then there's the citation. Then I have my notes about why this works, right? This makes the audience see Mrs. Bryant as a selfless and caring person since she takes the time to talk to others while she's mourning and even thanks them. This is important because as an audience, we are more likely to want to listen to someone who comes across as selfless, caring, and thankful at a time in her life when she's experiencing such a tremendous loss. So you can see I've got the example here and then also lots of explanation about why it works. So when I put these two together, I'm ready to make, a paragraph or whichever assignment that I'm asked to create on the discussion board. I also jotted down an example of pathos, right? So she used pathos to help her audience understand the joy her daughter brought to her life. And she says that she loved to bake. And then over here, we talk about how that choice to share those kind of precious moments of, baking and spending time together can help the audience to feel those emotions with her. So when you're practicing with rhetoric for this assignment, you should read Vanessa Bryant's speech and the outside source that you were given, looking for the rhetorical situation from the Navarro piece, and then looking for rhetoric from Bryant's speech as you go. Make notes for yourself. So for the speech, you want to find those rhetorical moves. Like I found pathos and ethos. You can find whichever ones you see. For the outside source, you need to find relevant information about the rhetorical situation. Then gather your thoughts. Figure out how you're going to summarize the rhetorical situation. Choose the quote you want to use from the outside source, and then figure out which rhetorical features you want to discuss from the speech. Name those, talk about why they work, and then use examples from the speech. Remember to post your responses to the discussion board. So if you go to the discussion board, there will be examples and directions for how to do this particular assignment. Don't forget to respond to 2 peers. So for all of your discussion board posts, you do your assignment and then you also respond to 2 peers. And then you can start planning for the same process, but with your first essay in mind. Because we're doing lots of the same types of things for your essay, right? We're still dealing with rhetoric, we're still looking at those rhetorical features and so on. So this is all practice for the same type of stuff you're going to be doing when the time comes to write essay 1.